The Great War has ended. The air, once thick with the stench of blood and gunpowder, has given way to a deathly silence. The 600-year-old Ottoman Empire, the undisputed titan that once stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of the Middle East, is drawing its final, ragged breath. Western politicians call it the sick man of Europe, a man on his deathbed. The victors, Britain, France, Italy, and Greece, are hunched over maps of the Middle East, pencils in hand, carving up the remains of a fallen giant. In Istanbul, the legendary capital, foreign troops march through the streets. Allied warships anchor in the Bosporus. The Ottoman Sultan, the Caliph of all Muslims, has surrendered in his palace, signing a humiliating treaty. A treaty that dissolves the army, hands the economy to foreigners, and effectively erases an independent nation from the globe. For the Turks, it seemed over. But in this darkest hour, a spark of defiance was struck. Not from the halls of the palace, but from a battle-hardened general. A blue-eyed rebel who refused to kneel before the Allies or obey his surrendering king. He knew what others dared not admit. The Ottoman Empire was rotten to the core. To him, the suffocating grip of religious tradition on a failing monarchy was the ultimate barrier to progress. He decided on a move that was as insane as it was impossible. He wouldn't save a dead empire. He would burn its remains. And from the ashes, he would forge a modern republic. History is in the headlines, but the truth? That's hidden in the profiles. Welcome to Profile. Subscribe to join our community of curious minds. Mustafa was born in 1881 in the port city of Salonika, the modern heart of the empire, though today it lies in Greece. Poverty followed him early after his father's death. His mother, a deeply religious woman, dreamed of seeing him in the robes of a cleric. But Mustafa had a different hunger. He craved order, power, and change. Against her will, he entered military school. It was there his iron will first emerged. He excelled so brilliantly in mathematics and military science that his teacher bestowed upon him the name Kemal, meaning perfection. From then on, he was Mustafa Kemal. In the military academies of Istanbul, he looked at his country and saw a decaying corpse. The army was backward. The palace was corrupt. While studying the forbidden works of French Enlightenment thinkers, he realized that the West had conquered the world through science and technology, while his people were drowning in the traditions of an absolute, failing monarchy. He joined secret circles of young officers, plotting to overthrow the tyranny of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. He was even arrested for a short time for his political activities. But his strategic genius was too great for the commanders to keep him away from the front lines for long. The empire was plunging into a cycle of devastating wars, from Libya to the Balkans. On these battlefields, Mustafa Kemal didn't just prove his bravery. He reached a final, cold conclusion. The Ottoman Empire, in its current form, was dead. To save the people, he would have to rebuild everything from scratch. But before he could change the nation, a global explosion would put him at the center of one of history's bloodiest struggles and turn a dissident officer into a national icon. World War I begins. In a fateful strategic move, the Ottoman Empire joins the alliance of Germany and Austria-Hungary, standing directly against the British, French, and Russian empires. By April 1915, the war reaches a fever pitch. The British and French hatch a daring plan to seize the Dardanelles Strait and march on Istanbul. If they succeed, the heart of the empire falls, and the Ottomans are finished. In this decisive battle, recorded in history as the Battle of Gallipoli, Mustafa Kemal is given command of the 19th Division. While high-ranking German officers oversaw the army, it was Mustafa Kemal who held the line at the most critical strategic points, the hills of Ereburnu. He displayed a haunting tactical genius. He predicted exactly where the enemy would land, a prediction even his superiors refused to believe. But Gallipoli wasn't just a stage for genius. It was a scene of raw violence and limitless sacrifice. In one of the most desperate moments of the war, when his soldiers had run out of ammunition and were beginning to retreat, Mustafa Kemal uttered a sentence that echoes in Turkish history to this day. He looked at his men and said, "I do not order you to attack. I order you to die. By the time we are killed, other forces and commanders will take our place." This was the spirit of the man, a willingness to sacrifice everything for the motherland. The Battle of Gallipoli ended in a hard-fought, bloody victory for the Ottomans. The British were forced to retreat, but the cost was staggering. Hundreds of thousands lay dead or wounded. The very soil of the peninsula turned red. Mustafa Kemal's role in preventing the fall of Istanbul made him a household name across the empire. The press hailed him as the savior of the capital. He was promoted to general. But the victory at Gallipoli could not stop the inevitable collapse. By October 1918, the Ottoman government surrendered, signing the Armistice of Mudros. Under this treaty, the Ottoman army was to be disarmed, and the Allies gained the right to occupy the most strategic regions, including Istanbul itself. Sultan Mehmed VI remained in his palace, surrendering to the Allied terms. The country was on the brink of total disintegration. But for General Mustafa Kemal, the war was only beginning. He refused to accept the Sultan's surrender. To him, the king was no longer a leader, he was a shadow. And in the heart of the occupied capital, the general began to plot a resurrection. With the end of the Great War, the legendary capital, Istanbul, fell under the occupation of British and Allied forces. Sultan Mehmed VI signed the Treaty of Sèvres, an agreement that partitioned the heart of Turkey among Britain, France, Italy, and Greece. The Ottoman state, for all intents and purposes, had ceased to exist as a sovereign nation. In this moment of total collapse, the central government, wary of Mustafa Kemal's growing influence, sent him to eastern Anatolia. His official mission was to disarm the remaining Ottoman troops and maintain order, but Mustafa Kemal had a different plan. On May 19, 1919, Kemal stepped off a small boat into the port of Samsun on the Black Sea. In that moment, his military mission became a national uprising. Instead of disarming his men, he began organizing army officers, local militias, and tribal leaders. His message was electric. The government in Istanbul is a puppet of the invaders. Resistance is our only hope. This was an act of open rebellion. The Sultan immediately stripped Kemal of his rank and issued a warrant for his arrest and execution. The court even secured religious fatwas, declaring Kemal's forces as outlaws and enemies of God. The War of Turkish Independence was now more than a battle against foreign invaders. It was a bloody civil war between the supporters of the ancient monarchy and the nationalists of Anatolia. With the genius of a grand strategist, Kemal established the Grand National Assembly in Ankara in April 1920. This was the birth of a shadow government, a center for the national resistance. Now, Turkey had two hearts, the surrendered Sultan in Istanbul and the revolutionary Kemal in Ankara. After years of grueling attritional warfare, Kemal's forces met the Greek army at the Battle of Sakarya. In a stunning victory, he halted their advance and forced a total retreat from Anatolia. The Allies, who had no desire to enter another prolonged war, were forced to the negotiating table. In November 1922, the Grand National Assembly did the unthinkable. It abolished the monarchy forever. Sultan Mehmed VI, the last king of a 600-year-old dynasty, slipped away on a British warship under the cover of night. In July 1923, with the signing of the Treaty of Lausanne, the full independence of Turkey and its modern borders were finally recognized by the world. On October 29, 1923, the Republic of Turkey was officially born. The man who began his journey as a rebel general was now the undisputed leader of a new nation. But for Mustafa Kemal, driving out the foreign armies was only half the mission. He held absolute power, and his next target was the very soul of the country. He believed that to survive, the ruins of the past had to be cleared away, to make room for a radical, Western-style future. In March 1924, Mustafa Kemal took a step that shook the foundations of the entire Muslim world. He abolished the Caliphate. The office that for centuries had symbolized the religious and political leadership of Islam was gone. The last caliph was expelled, and with him, the final remnant of the Ottoman soul. This was the start of a cultural revolution so radical, it remains one of the most debated experiments of the 20th century. Mustafa Kemal believed that to be modern, Turkey had to look, dress, and think like the West. He replaced Sharia law with European legal codes, translated almost word for word from Switzerland and Italy. He closed religious schools and Sufi lodges, moving religion out of the public square and under the strict control of the state. Even the way people looked had to change. In 1925, he passed the hat law, banning the traditional fez and making European-style hats mandatory for men. Then came the deepest rupture of all. In 1928, he abolished the Arabic Ottoman script, replacing it with the Latin alphabet. Kemal himself traveled the country with a blackboard, teaching his people the new letters. It was a bridge to the West, but it was also a wall built between the new generation and 1,000 years of their ancestors' history. By 1932, the secularization reached the very minarets of the mosques. The call to prayer, the adhan, was ordered to be recited in Turkish instead of the traditional Arabic. To ensure these reforms took hold, he ruled with an iron fist. Any religious or ethnic resistance was met with the independence tribunals and crushed. In 1934, the parliament gave him the name Atatürk, the father of the Turks. But the years of war, political pressure, and heavy drinking had taken their toll. By 1938, Atatürk was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. On the morning of November 10th, in Dolmabahce Palace, his heart stopped. At exactly 9:05 a.m., every clock in the palace was stopped, a tradition that continues across Turkey to this day. Atatürk's legacy is a paradox. He pulled a nation out of the ashes of a fallen empire, saved it from total partition, and built a modern state where none existed. To the vast majority of Turks, he remains the eternal hero, the undisputed father. But the hammer blow modernization he forced from the top down created a deep fracture, a divide between the secular elites of the cities and the religious heartland of Anatolia. A divide that would lay dormant for decades, only to reshape the politics of Turkey in the 21st century. His influence didn't stop at Turkey's borders. He became the blueprint for other regional leaders like Reza Shah in Iran, who sought to drag their traditional societies into the modern world through the sheer force of will. So we ask you, was Atatürk's radical destruction of tradition a historical necessity to save a dying nation? Or can a country modernize without cutting its ties to its own identity and faith? And how do you see the parallels between his reforms and the modern history of the Middle East? Every story has two sides, and the truth usually lies somewhere in the shadows. We want to hear your perspective. Join the discussion in the comments below. If this profile gave you a new perspective, support our mission with a like and share. Thank you for being part of the Profile community. Until next time, stay curious.